The massive alien ship drifted silently through the darkness of space, its hull gleaming under the distant light of the sun. Commander Vextar stood on the bridge, his 6 arms crossed as he studied the blue planet that hung before them like a jewel in the void. Earth looked so peaceful from here, so helpless and unaware of what was coming. "Report," Vextar commanded, his voice echoing through the command center where dozens of his crew worked at glowing control panels. "The surveillance data is complete, Commander," replied his intelligence officer, a thin creature with large black eyes. "Earth shows minimal defensive capabilities. Their weapons are primitive nuclear devices, mostly pointed at each other rather than toward space. Their military forces are scattered across multiple nations that seem more interested in fighting among themselves than preparing for external threats." Vextar nodded with satisfaction. The Zephyrian Confederacy had been watching this planet for 30 years, ever since their long-range scouts had detected signs of industrial civilization. What they had found was almost disappointing in its simplicity. The humans had barely managed to put a few small stations in orbit around their planet, and their space-based defenses were practically non-existent. "What about their naval forces?" Vextar asked, though he already knew the answer would be equally pathetic. "Scattered surface fleets using chemical propulsion and basic projectile weapons," the officer replied. "Nothing that could threaten even our smallest escort vessels. They have some underwater craft, but our deep scan sensors show only a few dozen primitive submarines hiding near their coastlines." Down on Earth, Admiral Jake Morrison sat in a chair 300 feet beneath the Pentagon, watching the same alien fleet on his own displays. Unlike the Zephyrians, however, Jake was not worried. He was excited. The moment humanity had been preparing for since 1947 was finally here, and everything was going exactly according to plan. "Sir, the aliens are conducting another deep space scan," reported Lieutenant Kate Walsh from her station. "Their sensors are focusing on our surface installations again." "Perfect," Jake replied with a slight smile. "Let them see exactly what we want them to see." "Are our decoy bases responding properly?" "Yes, sir. All surface military installations are maintaining normal operational patterns. The aliens are getting exactly the intelligence profile we've been projecting for decades." Jake stood and walked to the large holographic display that dominated the center of the command room. The display showed Earth as the aliens saw it. A planet defended by scattered military bases, a few orbital platforms, and traditional naval fleets that looked impressive to human standards, but would seem like toys to any advanced spacefaring civilization. What the display did not show, and what no alien sensor could detect, was the truth. 3 miles beneath the Pacific Ocean, Dr. Lisa Carter was overseeing the final preparations in Facility Alpha, one of 47 massive underwater construction centers that had been operating in secret for over 70 years. The facility was the size of a major city, carved into the ocean floor and protected by technology that made it completely invisible to any known detection method. "Status report on the fleet construction." Lisa spoke into her communication device as she walked through a corridor lined with massive windows. Outside, she could see the ocean floor stretching away into darkness, but it was not empty darkness. Lights moved in the distance, marking the locations of other facilities, underwater cities, and the massive submarine yards where humanity had been building its true defense force. "Construction is complete on all primary vessels," came the reply from Chief Engineer Bob Taylor. "We have 1,047,312 combat-ready vessels of all classes. The largest Dreadnought-class submarines are fully armed and crewed, and the carrier groups are loaded with their full complement of fighter craft." Lisa nodded as she entered the main observation deck. Before her stretched a sight that would have driven the aliens above into immediate panic. Row after row of massive submarines sat in underwater hangar bays, each one larger than anything floating on Earth's surface. These were not the primitive underwater craft that alien sensors detected near the coastlines. These were warships built with technology that had been reverse-engineered, improved upon, and perfected over decades of secret development. The Roswell incident in 1947 had not been a crash. It had been first contact, carefully managed and hidden from the public. The alien visitors had been peaceful researchers, but their technology had opened humanity's eyes to the reality of galactic civilization. Other species were out there, and not all of them would be as friendly as those first visitors had been. From that moment, A secret global alliance had formed. While the surface world continued its normal political divisions and conflicts, the real leaders of Earth had begun the greatest construction project in human history. They had moved humanity's true industrial and military capacity beneath the oceans, where alien sensors could not penetrate, and where unlimited resources could be dedicated to preparing for the day when less friendly aliens would arrive. Back on the alien command ship, Vextar was reviewing the final attack plans with his fleet commanders. 3,000 Zephyrian warships had gathered at the edge of Earth's solar system, a force large enough to conquer most civilized worlds with minimal resistance. The preliminary bombardment will target their major cities and military installations, Vextar explained, pointing to locations on a holographic map of Earth. Once we have eliminated their defensive capabilities, we will land occupation forces at key points around the globe. Based on our intelligence, we expect complete surrender within 72 hours of the initial attack. His subordinates nodded in agreement. It was a standard conquest plan that had worked on dozens of other worlds. Primitive civilization simply could not compete with the advanced technology and superior numbers of the Confederacy fleet. "What about their orbital stations?" asked one of the fleet commanders. "Negligible threat," Vextar replied dismissively. "A few small research outposts and communication satellites. We will destroy them in the first wave, just to eliminate any possibility of coordinated resistance, but they pose no real danger to our forces." The Zephyrian commander activated his communication system and sent a message toward Earth, broadcasting on all human communication frequencies. It was the standard surrender demand that the Confederacy had used for centuries, translated into the primary Earth languages. "People of Earth," the message began, "you are now under the authority of the Zephyrian Confederacy. You have 48 hours to surrender all military forces and prepare for occupation. Resistance is futile and will only result in unnecessary destruction. Comply, and your transition to Confederacy citizenship will be peaceful." Jake Morrison received the message at the same time as every other world leader, and like them, he immediately called emergency meetings and appeared to panic in exactly the way the aliens expected. The United Nations convened an emergency session, with representatives shouting and arguing about impossible decisions. News networks around the world broadcast images of the alien fleet and speculation about humanity's helpless situation. It was perfect theater, and every bit of it was carefully scripted to maintain the deception that had protected Earth for 7 decades. The aliens saw exactly what they expected to see: a primitive world in chaos, completely unprepared for the reality of galactic warfare. Deep beneath the oceans, 1 million human warships waited silently for the order to rise. The 48-hour deadline was ticking down, and Captain Ben Rodriguez could feel the tension building throughout his massive submarine. The USS Leviathan stretched for nearly 2 miles beneath the Atlantic Ocean, its hull darker than the deepest ocean trenches and completely invisible to any sensor technology the aliens possessed. Ben had commanded this vessel for 8 years, but he had never imagined he would actually need to use it for its intended purpose. "Captain, we're receiving final activation codes from Deep Command," reported his communications officer, Lieutenant Sam Parker. The bridge of the Leviathan looked nothing like the cramped submarine control rooms that existed on the surface world. This was a spacious command center with dozens of workstations, holographic displays, and viewing screens that showed the ocean around them in perfect detail. Ben nodded and walked to his command chair, which was positioned in the center of the bridge like the captain's seat on a starship. Around him, his crew of 3,000 sailors worked quietly at their stations, preparing systems that had been tested countless times but never used in actual combat. The Leviathan was classified as a Dreadnought-class submarine, armed with gravitational pulse weapons that could tear apart alien starships and protected by energy shields that made it nearly indestructible. "All stations report ready for combat operations," announced Commander Lisa Hayes from her position at the tactical station. "Weapon systems are charged, shields are at full power, and all fighter bays are prepared for launch." 3,000 miles away, the Zephyrian fleet was beginning its attack on Earth's surface defenses. Commander Vextar watched with satisfaction as his ships opened fire on major cities and military installations around the globe. Explosions bloomed across the planet's surface as alien weapons struck their targets with devastating precision. "Excellent work," Vextar told his weapons officer. The human military bases are offering minimal resistance. Their primitive missiles and aircraft pose no threat to our shields. What Vextar did not realize was that every target his fleet destroyed had been carefully selected by human military planners decades earlier. The bases that burned were decoys, filled with outdated equipment and automated systems designed to create convincing explosions. The real military installations remained hidden beneath miles of ocean water, completely untouched by the alien bombardment. General Susan Hayes stood in the primary Deep Command Center, located 4 miles beneath the Mariana Trench in the deepest part of Earth's oceans. The command center was a marvel of human engineering, a vast underground city that served as the nerve center for humanity's secret defense network. Massive screens showed the alien attack in real time, displaying the destruction of surface targets while monitoring the true defensive assets that remained hidden below. Phase 1 is proceeding exactly as planned, Susan reported to Admiral Jake Morrison, who had joined her in the Deep Command facility. The aliens are destroying our decoy installations and believe they are crippling our defensive capabilities. Surface losses are within acceptable parameters. Jake nodded grimly as he watched alien ships systematically destroy targets that had been built specifically to be destroyed. It was a harsh plan, but necessary. The deception had to be complete, and that meant allowing the aliens to believe they were winning while humanity's real strength remained completely hidden. "What's the status of our submarine fleets?" Jake asked. "All 1 million vessels are in position and ready for surface operations," Susan replied. "The crew reports are showing excellent morale despite the situation. Our people know what's at stake." In underwater cities across the globe, millions of human military personnel were making final preparations for the largest naval engagement in history. Captain Danny Walsh stood on the bridge of his submarine, the USS Kraken, checking systems one last time before the order came to rise. His vessel was smaller than the massive dreadnoughts like the Leviathan, but it was still larger than any surface warship that had ever been built. "All departments report ready." "Captain," announced his first officer, Lieutenant Commander Amy Johnson. "The crew is at battle stations and waiting for orders." Danny looked out through the forward viewing screen at the ocean floor around them. In every direction, he could see the lights of other submarines preparing for the same mission. Row after row of warships stretched away into the darkness, each one crewed by sailors who had trained their entire careers for this moment. Most of them had never seen the surface world, having been born and raised in the underwater cities that had become humanity's true home. The plan was simple in concept, but incredible in scale. When the order came, 1 million submarines would rise from the ocean floors simultaneously, emerging at coordinates that had been calculated years in advance. The alien fleet would suddenly find itself surrounded by a human armada that dwarfed anything they had ever encountered. "Commander." Vextar was reviewing damage reports when his sensor officer called out in alarm. "Commander, I'm detecting massive energy signatures rising from the planet's oceans. The readings are off our instruments." "Explain," Vextar demanded, moving quickly to the sensor station. "Sir, there are objects emerging from underwater locations all across the planet. Thousands of them, maybe tens of thousands. The energy signatures are consistent with large starships, but that's impossible. Our intelligence showed no significant underwater installations." Vextar stared at the sensor displays in growing confusion. The readings were unmistakable, but they made no sense based on everything the Confederacy knew about Earth's military capabilities. How could a primitive planet hide such massive fleets beneath their oceans? "Could these be natural phenomena?" he asked hopefully. "Negative, sir. The objects are moving in formation and generating artificial energy fields. These are definitely constructed vessels, and they're big. Some of them are reading as larger than our own dreadnoughts." Dr. Amy Johnson monitored the situation from her position in Deep Command Center Alpha, watching as sensors tracked the rising submarine fleets. The psychological impact on the alien forces was exactly what human strategists had hoped for. Decades of careful planning had led to this moment, when Earth would reveal that it was not a helpless, primitive world but a civilization that had been preparing for galactic warfare since before. Most of the alien crew members had been born. All submarine. "Commanders report successful surface breach in progress," she announced to the command staff. "The alien fleet appears to be in complete confusion. Their formations are breaking up as they try to respond to contacts appearing simultaneously across the entire planet. Captain Ben Rodriguez felt the Leviathan shudder slightly as it broke through the ocean surface. For the first time in its operational history, around him, his crew worked calmly at their stations despite the magnitude of what they were doing. Through the main viewing screen, he could see alien starships hanging in space above. Their formations scattered as they tried to respond to the impossible sight of 1,000,000 warships rising from Earth's oceans. All systems showing green. "Captain," reported his tactical officer, "weapons are locked onto target and ready to fire on your command." Ben smiled grimly as he opened a communication channel to the alien fleet. It was time for the Zephyrians to learn that they had made a very serious mistake in underestimating the humans of Earth. Commander Vextar gripped the edge of his control console as his bridge erupted in chaos around him. Warning lights flashed red across every display, and alarm sounds filled the air as his crew tried to make sense of what their sensors were telling them. The impossible was happening right before their eyes, and none of their training had prepared them for this situation. "Sir, the count is now at 50,000 vessels and still rising," shouted his sensor officer over the noise. "These ships are emerging from ocean locations we never even scanned properly. Our intelligence was completely wrong about this planet's defensive capabilities." "That's impossible," Vextar snarled, his 6 arms working frantically at different control panels. "We watched this world for 30 years. We know everything about their military forces. They have primitive surface navies and maybe a few dozen submarines hiding near their coasts." "Commander, we're now reading over 100,000 contacts," the officer reported, his voice growing more panicked with each update. "The energy signatures are massive. Some of these vessels are showing power readings that exceed our own flagship." Down on Earth, Admiral Jake Morrison stood calmly in the primary deep command center, watching the alien fleet's growing panic on his tactical displays. Everything was proceeding exactly as the human military planners had hoped. The Zephyrian forces were scattered across space in small groups, having spread out to attack multiple surface targets simultaneously. Now they found themselves facing an enemy that outnumbered them by hundreds to 1, and their formations were in complete disarray. "Sir, all submarine fleets report successful surface breach," announced General Susan Hayes from her command station. "Operation Rising Tide is proceeding on schedule. The alien forces appear to be in complete shock." Jake nodded with satisfaction as he watched the tactical display update in real time. Red dots representing alien ships were scattered across the orbital space around Earth, while blue dots representing human submarines rose from every ocean on the planet. The sight was beautiful in its precision, the result of 70 years of careful planning and preparation. Captain Danny Walsh was the first submarine commander to fully breach the surface of the Atlantic Ocean. His vessel, the USS Kraken, rose from the depths like a metal mountain emerging from the sea. Water cascaded from its hull as it broke through the waves, revealing a warship that was 3 times larger than any surface vessel that had ever been built by human hands. "Captain, we have visual contact with alien vessels in high orbit," reported his tactical officer, Lieutenant Commander Amy Johnson. "They appear to be breaking formation and moving into defensive positions." Danny looked out through the main viewing screen at the alien ships hanging in space above them. From his position on the ocean surface, he could see the sleek forms of Zephyrian starships moving frantically through the vacuum, their formations completely disrupted by the sudden appearance of the human fleet. It was exactly the reaction that human strategists had predicted. "Open a communication channel to all human vessels," Danny ordered. "It's time to let our visitors know that they picked the wrong planet to invade." Across the globe, similar scenes were playing out as massive submarines emerged from every major ocean. The Pacific Ocean surface was broken by hundreds of dreadnought-class vessels, each one bristling with weapons that the Zephyrians had never seen before. The Atlantic revealed carrier submarines that launched swarms of fighter craft into the air, while the Indian Ocean disgorged destroyer-class vessels that moved with impossible speed and agility. Dr. Lisa Carter watched from her position in Facility Alpha as the ocean floor around her underwater city began to empty. For decades, she had overseen the construction of humanity's secret navy, working with teams of engineers and scientists who had dedicated their lives to preparing for this moment. Now, as she watched the fruits of their labor rise toward the surface, she felt a mixture of pride and terror at what humanity had accomplished. All construction facilities report successful launch of assigned vessel complements, she announced to Admiral Morrison over the secure communication link. The ocean floors are clear and all personnel are safely secured in the deep installations. Excellent work, Doctor, Jake replied. Your teams have given humanity the tools we need to survive this encounter. Commander Vextar watched in growing horror as his fleet's tactical computers tried to calculate the size of the human armada. The numbers were beyond anything the Zephyrian Confederacy had ever encountered. Even their largest invasion fleets rarely exceeded 10,000 vessels, and those were assembled only for the conquest of major galactic civilizations. Yet here was a primitive planet that had somehow hidden 1 million warships beneath its oceans. Sir, we're receiving a communication from the human fleet, reported his communications officer. They're broadcasting on all frequencies. Put it through, Vextar ordered, though he dreaded what he was about to hear. The main viewing screen flickered to life, showing the bridge of a human submarine. The figure at the center of the screen was clearly the vessel's commander, a human male wearing a uniform that looked far more advanced than anything the Confederacy had expected from this species. Attention, Zephyrian fleet, the human said calmly. This is Admiral Jake Morrison of the Earth Defense Forces. You have made a serious error in judgment about our planet's capabilities. We have been aware of your presence in our system for weeks, and we have been preparing for your arrival for much longer than that. Vextar stared at the screen in disbelief. The human spoke with complete confidence, showing no fear despite facing a fleet that should have been able to destroy any primitive civilization with ease. Behind the Admiral, Vextar could see other humans working at control stations that looked surprisingly sophisticated. Your intelligence about Earth was deliberately fed to you through channels we have controlled for decades, Jake continued. What you believed were our defensive capabilities were merely decoys designed to lure you into attacking at a time and place of our choosing. You are now surrounded by 1 million Earth Defense Force vessels, each one equipped with technology that your species helped us develop through previous contacts. The revelation hit Vextar like a physical blow. Previous contacts meant that humanity had been in touch with other alien species for years, possibly decades. Everything the Confederacy thought they knew about this planet had been carefully constructed lies designed to make them underestimate human capabilities. You have exactly 10 minutes to surrender your entire fleet, Jake announced. Any vessel that attempts to flee or fight will be destroyed. Your forces are outnumbered, outgunned, and completely surrounded. Choose wisely. The communication ended, leaving Vexitar staring at a blank screen while alarms continued to sound throughout his ship. Around him, his crew looked to him for orders, but he had no idea what to tell them. In 30 years of military service, he had never encountered a situation like this. The Confederacy's most feared invasion fleet had been trapped by a species they had considered primitive and helpless. Sir, what are your orders? Asked his second-in-command. Tar looked at the tactical display showing the impossible number of human vessels surrounding his forces and realized that he had only one choice that would allow any of his people to survive this encounter. The 10-minute deadline expired with no response from the Zephyrian fleet, and Admiral Jake Morrison gave the order that changed everything. All vessels commence Operation Deep Strike. Show them what Earth is really capable of. Captain Nicole Turner received the attack order aboard her submarine battleship, the USS Poseidon, and immediately turned to her weapons officer. Target the nearest Zephyrian heavy cruiser and fire gravitational pulse cannons at full power. The Poseidon's main weapons charged with a deep humming sound that vibrated through the entire vessel. These were not the primitive projectile weapons that the aliens had expected to face, but gravitational manipulation technology that had been reverse-engineered and improved from crashed alien vessels over the past 70 years. When the weapons fired, they created focused waves of gravitational force that could crush starship hulls like paper. The Zephyrian heavy cruiser never had a chance to defend itself. The gravitational pulse struck its shields and tore through them as if they were made of tissue, then continued on to crumple the ship's hull into a twisted ball of metal. The vessel imploded in seconds, its crew of 800 aliens killed instantly by forces they had never encountered before. Direct hit and target destroyed, reported the weapons officer with satisfaction. Enemy vessel showed no resistance to our gravitational weapons. Commander Vextar watched in horror as one of his most powerful ships was destroyed by a single shot from a human submarine. The tactical displays around his bridge showed similar scenes playing out across the entire battle zone, as human vessels opened fire on his scattered fleet. Zephyrian ships that had seemed invincible just minutes earlier were being torn apart by weapons that defied everything the Confederacy knew about military technology. All ships, emergency defensive formation, he ordered frantically. Concentrate fire on the nearest human vessels and try to break through their lines. But his fleet was scattered across thousands of miles of space, having spread out to attack multiple surface targets simultaneously, now that weakness became fatal, as isolated groups of Zephyrian ships found themselves facing overwhelming numbers of human submarines that could fight just as effectively in space as they could underwater. Captain Greg Phillips commanded a squadron of fast attack submarines that had been designed specifically for hunting enemy vessels. His ship, the USS Shark, moved through space with the same deadly grace it showed beneath Earth's oceans, using advanced propulsion systems that allowed it to change direction and speed in ways that confused alien targeting computers. "Captain, we have 3 Zephyrian destroyers trying to escape toward the outer system," reported his tactical officer, Lieutenant Bob Taylor. "They're moving at maximum speed, but we can intercept them easily." Greg smiled grimly as he ordered his squadron to pursue the fleeing alien ships. The Zephyrians had no idea that human submarines could transition seamlessly between underwater and space operations, a capability that no other known species had ever developed. While alien ships were designed for either space combat or atmospheric flight, human vessels could fight effectively in any environment. "All ships, spread out and surround the enemy vessels," Greg commanded. "These 3 ships destroyed a surface base in Australia 20 minutes ago. Time to show them that actions have consequences." The 3 Zephyrian destroyers found themselves surrounded by 12 human attack submarines that moved with impossible coordination. The alien ships tried to fight back, firing their energy weapons at the approaching human vessels, but their shots were absorbed harmlessly by energy shields that had been perfected through decades of secret research. "Enemy weapons are having no effect on our shielding," reported the weapons officer aboard the USS Shark. "Their technology appears to be several generations behind our defensive systems." "Then, let's end this quickly," Greg replied. "All ships fire at will." The battle in space around Earth had become completely one-sided within the first hour of combat. Zephyrian ships that had conquered dozens of worlds found themselves helpless against human technology that surpassed their own in every category. The submarines that rose from Earth's oceans were not just numerous. They were individually superior to anything the Confederacy had ever built. Admiral Jake Morrison watched the battle progress from his command center deep beneath the ocean. Status reports flowed in from submarine commanders across the globe, all reporting the same thing. The Zephyrian fleet was being systematically destroyed with minimal human casualties. "Sir, we're receiving surrender requests from 17 Zephyrian vessels," reported General Susan Hayes. "They're requesting permission to land and surrender their crews." "Grant the request, but maintain full surveillance," Jake ordered. "Any ship that tries to escape or shows hostile intent is to be destroyed immediately." Commander Danny Walsh aboard the USS Kraken was pursuing a group of Zephyrian command ships that were trying to reach the edge of the solar system. These were the largest vessels in the alien fleet, massive dreadnoughts that carried thousands of crew members and enough firepower to level entire cities. "Captain, the lead enemy vessel is charging its main weapons," announced his tactical officer. "They appear to be preparing for a final desperate attack. All weapons target their power core and fire," Danny commanded. "End this before they can harm anyone." The Kraken's gravitational cannons fired in perfect synchronization, creating a focused beam of gravitational force that struck the alien dreadnought amidships. The massive vessel's power core overloaded instantly, creating a brilliant explosion that could be seen from Earth's surface as the ship and its escort vessels were destroyed. Captain Ben Rodriguez aboard the USS Leviathan had been assigned to capture the Zephyrian flagship, the vessel that carried Commander Vextar and the invasion fleet's command staff. This was a more delicate operation that required precision, rather than overwhelming firepower. "Target their propulsion systems and weapons arrays," Ben ordered his weapons officer. "I want that ship disabled but intact. We need prisoners for interrogation." The Leviathan's weapons fired with surgical precision, destroying the alien flagship's engines and weapon systems while leaving the crew compartments undamaged. The massive Zephyrian command ship drifted helplessly in space, its lights flickering as emergency power systems struggled to maintain life support. "Captain, we're receiving a surrender signal from the enemy flagship," reported the communications officer. "They're requesting terms for the surrender of their entire remaining fleet." Ben nodded with satisfaction as he prepared to accept the surrender of the Confederacy's most feared military commander. The battle for Earth was over, and humanity had won a victory that would echo across the galaxy for generations to come. "Prepare a boarding party," he ordered. "It's time to have a conversation with our visitors about the consequences of underestimating the human race." Around Earth, the space that had been filled with 3,000 alien warships just hours earlier now held only wreckage, and a few dozen vessels flying white flags of surrender. The Zephyrian Confederacy's invasion fleet had been utterly destroyed by an enemy they had thought was primitive and helpless. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity was far from helpless, and that Earth's oceans had been hiding the most powerful navy in known space. 6 hours after the battle began, Commander Vextar sat in the detention facility aboard the USS Leviathan, staring at the metal walls that now served as his prison. His flagship had been boarded by human Marines led by Colonel Frank Davis, and the surrender had been completed with an efficiency that spoke of careful planning and preparation. The humans had not acted like a species that had just won their first space battle, but rather like veterans who had been preparing for this moment for decades. "The Admiral will see you now," announced Colonel Davis as he entered the detention area. The human officer wore body armor that looked more advanced than anything the Confederacy had ever developed, and his weapons were clearly based on technology that exceeded Zephyrian standards. Vexitar was escorted to a conference room where Admiral Jake Morrison waited with several other human officers. The Zephyrian commander expected to face primitive aliens who would gloat about their unexpected victory. But instead, he found himself looking at military professionals who treated him with the same respect they would show any defeated enemy commander. "Please sit," Jake said politely, gesturing to a chair that had been designed to accommodate Vextar's alien physiology. "I imagine you have many questions about what just happened here." "How?" Vextar asked simply. "How did your species hide such capabilities from our surveillance? We watched your world for 30 years and saw nothing that suggested you possessed advanced military technology." Jake smiled slightly as he activated a holographic display that showed Earth from space. "Because we wanted you to see exactly what you saw. Every piece of intelligence your people gathered about Earth was carefully controlled by our deep space monitoring networks. We've been aware of your species and dozens of others for over 70 years. The hologram shifted to show the underwater cities that had remained hidden beneath Earth's oceans. Vextar stared in amazement at vast installations that stretched for miles across the ocean floors, manufacturing facilities that dwarfed anything the Confederacy had ever built, and populations that had been living and working in complete secrecy for generations. "The truth is that humanity moved our real civilization underwater decades ago," Jake continued. "What you observed on the surface were the remnants of our old society, maintained as a facade to hide our true capabilities. Every major government on Earth has been part of this deception since 1947. Dr. Lisa Carter had left her deep ocean facilities and now stood before the United Nations General Assembly, addressing not just the representatives of Earth's surface nations, but also the global television audience that was learning the truth about their world for the first time. The revelation that humanity had been living a massive lie for 70 years was shocking enough, but the knowledge that vast underwater cities existed beneath the oceans was almost beyond comprehension. For 7 decades, the surface world continued to function normally while our real society developed beneath the waves, Lisa explained to the stunned audience. Millions of humans have spent their entire lives in underwater cities, working to build the defenses that saved our planet today. They sacrificed normal lives on the surface so that humanity would survive first contact with hostile alien species. The audience sat in complete silence as Dr. Carter activated displays showing the underwater cities in detail. Children had been born and raised in these facilities, never seeing sunlight or breathing surface air, dedicating their lives to preparing for a war that might never come. Families had lived for generations in artificial environments, maintaining the secret that had protected Earth from conquest. The submarine fleet that defeated the Zephyrian invasion represents the largest construction project in human history, Lisa continued. 1 million vessels built using technology that we reverse-engineered and improved upon from alien contact over the past 70 years. Every ship in that fleet is crewed by humans who volunteered to spend their lives preparing for this moment. Commander Alex Thompson had been chosen as Earth's first galactic defense coordinator, tasked with managing humanity's emergence as a major galactic power. His first responsibility was establishing communication with other alien civilizations and making it clear that Earth was no longer a primitive world ripe for conquest. Send the message to all known alien governments. Alex ordered his communication staff, make sure they understand that any species considering hostile action against Earth should reconsider their plans very carefully. The message that went out across galactic communication networks was simple but effective. It included detailed sensor recordings of the battle that had just taken place, showing how easily human forces had defeated what was considered one of the most powerful military fleets in known space. The implications were clear to any alien leader who saw the footage. Within days, the story of Earth's deception and victory had spread throughout the galaxy. Species that had been planning their own invasions of the seemingly helpless world quietly abandoned those plans and began preparing diplomatic missions instead. The humans had demonstrated something that no other known species possessed: the ability to maintain a deception of weakness while building overwhelming strength in secret. Captain Ben Rodriguez, now promoted to Admiral of the Deep Fleet, stood on the bridge of the USS Leviathan as it prepared for humanity's first interstellar mission. The submarine that had been designed for defending Earth's oceans was now being equipped for travel between star systems, carrying human diplomats and scientists to make contact with alien civilizations on equal terms. Admiral, we're receiving approach requests from 17 different alien species, reported his communications officer. They all want to establish diplomatic relations with Earth. Ben smiled as he watched the approach vectors of alien ships that were keeping a very respectful distance from Earth's defensive perimeter. Word had spread quickly about humanity's military capabilities, and no one wanted to risk being seen as a threat by the species that had hidden a million-ship navy beneath their planet's oceans. Grant them permission to approach, but maintain full defensive positions, Ben ordered. Let them see our capabilities while we talk about peaceful relations. The underwater cities that had hidden humanity's secret for so long now served as launching points for exploration vessels heading to distant stars. Captain Danny Walsh prepared his ship, the USS Kraken, for a mission to establish contact with peaceful alien civilizations that had been afraid to approach Earth while the Zephyrian threat existed. Captain, all systems are ready for interstellar travel, reported his first officer, Lieutenant Commander Amy Johnson. The crew is excited about finally getting to see what's out there beyond our solar system. Danny nodded as he looked out at the ocean surface one last time before departing for the stars. The Great Deception was over, and humanity's true journey into galactic civilization was just beginning. The species that had hidden beneath the waves for 70 years was now ready to take its place among the stars, backed by the most powerful navy the galaxy had ever seen. Admiral Jake Morrison stood in the primary Deep Command Center, watching as human ships departed for dozens of different star systems. The plan that had begun in 1947 with the recovery of crashed alien technology had succeeded beyond anyone's wildest dreams. Earth was safe, humanity was strong, and the galaxy would never again mistake humans for a primitive species ripe for conquest. The aliens had believed Earth was helpless, but they had learned the hardest lesson in galactic politics: never underestimate the humans, especially when they have 70 years to prepare and access to the vast oceans of their world.